The world returned like a dimmer switch, not a sunrise. Beeps first, then the cool drag of air inside a throat that felt borrowed. Maya counted stitches with her fingers until the bandages stopped her. The number had been said aloud, 200. But the body didn't accept math. It accepted pain, then drifted. A ceiling tile was missing above her bed. A square of shadow that looked like a camera lens. She thought of focus, of the way you breathe before pressing the shutter, and the moment remembered to be afraid. Someone had undone her and sewn her back. A whisper from the hallway found the crack in the door. He's still out there. The words fell into her chest like a stone. She wanted proof, a picture, something that held the truth without trembling. Instead, she had a plastic button for morphine and a nurse with kind eyes. When the nurse asked if she knew her name, Maya lied and said yes. Pain arrived in waves that taught her patience. Each breath negotiated with the stitches that laced her torso. Words came back in fragments: light, gravel, a hand at the base of her skull. When Detective Siddiqui introduced herself, Maya searched the woman's eyes for disbelief and found only quiet math, the kind investigators do to hold rage at a distance. "You don't have to remember now," the detective said, and Maya felt the refusal rise before the thought formed. She had learned to work in bad light. Memory could be coaxed the same way. Carmen tucked a blanket around her like she was still a girl between fevers. Jonah cracked a joke soft as tissue and the room breathed again. On the table lay Maya's camera, sealed in evidence plastic. It looked like a pet, waiting at a door. She thought, "I will teach my hands to hold it again." The first night she asked for the mirrors to be covered. The second she asked for them back. Facing herself was like developing a print in a darkroom's slow emergence. Features rinsed by truth. The map of sutures fascinated and repelled her. Jonah explained the healing in practical terms, and that steadied her. "Doctor," Menon spoke of micro-tears and time frames, then added, almost as an apology, that justice would move slower than scar tissue. Tessa's voice arrived as a voicemail. She was brave enough to play a cascade of breath, then jokes, then a promise to bring coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Maya laughed, and the laugh hurt, and she decided the pain could be currency she'd spend to move forward. Sleep came with storm sounds and a single image, cufflinks flashing like fox eyes in the dark. Detective Siddiqui returned with a folder slim enough to insult. Witness statements hedged. Camera footage was unavailable due to maintenance. A city that could watch everything had somehow blinked at the precise moment she needed it to see. Carmen bristled. Dr. Manon's jaw twitched. The detective didn't make promises, which made Maya trust her more. "What you remember will matter," Siddiqui said, and slid a legal pad across the tray. Maya wrote the senses: first river smell, iron and algae. Cologne with citrus top, a cuff scraping bone, a whisper shaped like a prayer but wrong. The words on the page looked like anchors thrown into fog. She closed her eyes and pulled at the rope. Somewhere, a bell rang. Shift change, or memory calling itself back. By the third day, Maya could sit without seeing stars. Jonah walked her to the end of the corridor. Tubes trailing like kites, and she learned the ward's rhythms, the coffer in 14B. The click of the night nurse's pen, the lullaby of machines. At the window she watched rain silver the parking lot and recognized a reflection behind her. Not a face, but a posture she knew from gala nights and donor walls. She didn't yet have Ethan's name, only the certainty of polished charm and a habit of standing with weight on the left heel. Back in bed, she asked for her camera, just to feel its heft. Carmen hesitated, then handed it over with a look that said both please and be careful. The camera was heavier than memory, but kinder. It asked only for light. Morning folded into the room with the smell of bleach and oranges from a peeled fruit. Carmen smuggled past the nurses. Tessa arrived with a backpack of batteries, and a voice that filled the corners without raising itself. She set her phone on the tray and played a clip from Maya's last assignment. Applause, clink of glassware, a man thanking donors in a velvet baritone. The sound ran a wire through Maya's body. Her stitches pulled where fear had nested, but beneath that something steadier stirred. A click of recognition like a lens seating into place. Jonah adjusted the IV rate and pretended not to listen, which made it easier to keep going. Together they built a list of anchors. Not just words, the citrus cologne, a habit of pausing before punchlines, the soft slap of leather soles on polished floors. Memory moved like shy wildlife, visible if you waited without hunger. She did. Detective Siddiqui asked for the recorder and placed it between them like a neutral third party. Her file was thin, but her questions were not. Did Maya remember the venue's ceiling height? The smell of the lobby flowers? Whether applause came in waves or in a single hard crack? Details could place a man in a room better than a face could. Dr. Menon stopped by on rounds and lingered, a quiet sentry, while Carmen counted syllables in a prayer under her breath. When Tessa mentioned a rumored donor who liked cameras more than causes, the detective's pen paused in midair and changed color, blue to black. That, she said, is interesting. The word settled like a weight. Maya closed her eyes and followed sound backward until she stood again at the edge of a stage, watching a smile that never reached the eyes. Back in bed, the world shrank to the rectangle of Tessa's laptop. Photos from the gala clicked by, each image a glass pane she could press against. Men in tuxedos, women in jewel tones, a stage washed in sapphire gels. There, a cufflink flared like a signal. Silver with an inlaid dark stone beveled edge, the size of a thumbnail. Maya remembered brushing against an arm and feeling the cold bite of that edge through a dress sleeve that wasn't hers. She described the scent again, the citrus top fading to something woody and expensive. Tessa tagged the frames and flagged the donor list. The detective's earlier caution vibrated in the room, a silent metronome measuring risk. Jonah returned with medication and found them hunched over the glow, conspirators. He smiled the way a person does when they fear for you and admire you in the same breath. Rehab meant measuring progress by inches and breaths. The therapist taught her to brace the abdomen without fighting the sutures, to turn pain into data. Maya counted steps to the window and back, letting the rhythm tease memory forward. Rain rinsed the parking lot until it gleamed, and in the reflection she pictured a man arranging his smile the way people polish shoes. Carmen walked beside her with a steadying hand she kept ready, but rarely used. Jonah set a timer and argued playfully about music for the next lap, and the argument was a gift because it made the room feel like any other recovery, rather than a battlefield. By the time the timer chirped, she could smell river water again, metal and algae, and her body remembered the angle of a wrist restraining hers. Memory was a patient animal. She learned to avoid sudden moves. That night the plan took on edges. Tessa outlined the gala calendar and circled a date with a red pen that bled slightly through the paper. The venue matched the ceiling height, Maya remembered. The donor list carried his name in handsome serif type, a column of money standing behind it. Detective Siddiqui did not bless the idea, but she did not forbid it either, which in this city meant proceed carefully and call me first. Carmen's silence was the loudest sound in the room until she asked whether courage counted if it left you hurt again. Maya thought of the camera waiting in its plastic husk and answered that courage counted because it recognized fear and walked with it instead of pretending it wasn't there. She slept with the legal pad on her lap, a list of details under her palms like a map she would learn by touch. The dress zipped with the caution of a truce. Maya hid the worst of the sutures beneath a midnight blazer borrowed from Tessa and pretended the fabric did not remember every place she had broken. The invitation said black tie. The mirror said, steady your breath. The plan said note everything and reveal nothing. Tessa rehearsed the cover story on the elevator. A boutique production house sniffing for donors, while Maya counted exits and reflected faces in chrome. The hotel's ballroom rose from the lobby like a promise designed by architects who believed in money as a kind of mercy. When the doors opened, a tide of perfume and laughter pressed close. She felt the old instinct seat itself behind her ribs, the one that sorted a room into patterns and edges. Then a voice rolled across the marble and clipped into the microphone, and the tide pulled her toward it. Inside the room was a cathedral of generosity, or the idea of it. Chandeliers floated like frost caught mid-fall. Ethan's voice skimmed the stage and returned with applause stuck to it. Maya tracked him by sound and scent. The citrus opening, the dry cedar settling in the spaces between people. She kept to the edges where service trays cut bright paths and the air moved. Tessa murmured into her ear, timestamps and angles, while Maya lifted the clutch and let the small camera breathe. She photographed wrists, shoes, name badges, the visual margins where truth leaks out. When Ethan laughed, he paused before the punchline as if testing a break, then finished with a light tap on the donor's shoulder. She remembered that tap as a press on her throat, the confused intimacy of it. The room cheered a pledge, and the pledge felt like a hush wrapped in promises. At the bar, the room's noise scattered into manageable shards. Maya claimed a strip of polished wood and asked for water, as if it were a cocktail she intended to enjoy. She watched Ethan travel in reflections, a dark comet with a charitable tail, his orbit precise and rehearsed. When he drew near, she turned her body 3 degrees, just enough to feel the brush of air when he stopped to greet a couple beside her. The cologne arrived first. Citrus bowed into cedar. Then the cufflink flashed. His left heel rested lightly as if saving weight for flight. A faint white crescent nicked his thumb at the base, old and purposeful. She lifted the camera and pretended to photograph the chandelier. The lens tilted to catch the cuff, the scar, the mouth that smiled without surrendering the eyes. The shutter whispered, and her body answered with a quiver that felt like a beginning. The speech ended, and the room broke into smaller storms. Maya slipped along a service corridor that smelled of detergent and peppercorn steaks, a vein behind the glittering heart. Her stitches tugged with each turn, reminders to choose angles, not heroics. In the half-light she spotted Ethan, jacket unbuttoned, conference smile loosened, speaking to a man who mattered less than the door behind them that led to stairs. She lifted the phone to her ear and pretended at a call, letting their words fold over her. The cadence from the river returned, a private rhythm nested inside the public one. Tessa's voice came soft through the bud. Keep breathing. And count to 8. By the time Ethan moved, she had his patterns logged, like beats per minute. He headed toward the balcony, and the smell of wet stone rose to meet them through a drape that sighed like a throat. The balcony held the city like a secret it had not agreed to keep. Wind combed the rain into threads that stitched light to the river. Maya stood at the rail far enough to be part of the night and not the conversation. Ethan leaned into a group of donors and told a story that polished his past to a shine, then broke away to take a call that did not ring. She angled so the glass door became a second camera, its reflection doubling his mouth, his hand, the cufflink flare. When he finished, she moved within earshot and asked a practice question about funding regional photo programs. He smiled with his eyes turned off and supplied the answer of a man who had said this before. The cadence clipped on the same syllable that had lived in her nightmares. She felt fear arrive, and with it, certainty. Tessa's whisper counted to 8. Maya pressed record. The footage transferred in silence, broken only by the hiss of the laptop fan. Every second of it pulsed with proof. The timbre, the cufflink flare, the exact cadence that had haunted her dreams. Detective Siddiqui watched with a face like stone softening only at the edges. "This is enough to rattle him," she said, "but not enough to cage him." The words landed heavy. By morning, the first message arrived: "Stop digging." Anonymous number. Then another with a photo of the hospital at night, her window glowing. Tessa wanted to call the press immediately. Siddiqui wanted time. Carmen wanted her daughter safe more than she wanted justice. Maya stared at the photo until her reflection stared back from the screen, eyes wide, jaw set. "They think fear will do what the knife couldn't," she said quietly. "They're wrong." By midday, the pushback turned public. A donation to Tessa's podcast was suspended pending review. The network's PR team called her reckless. An unsigned email warned Siddiqui to drop the harassment angle. Maya realized the city protected its golden sons better than its wounded daughters. Carmen suggested staying elsewhere. The detective arranged a temporary safe house under the pretext of media noise. Maya agreed, then asked for one night to pack alone. The apartment felt suddenly foreign, a museum of unspilled life. She moved through it slowly, touching things she might never see again: the camera shelf, the cracked mug, the photograph of her and her father at 7. Outside, rain hit the fire escape like impatient fingers. When the lights flickered once, she didn't move. "I'm still here," she whispered, to whoever might be listening. They moved her to a modest motel by the highway, beige walls and overwashed linens, a limbo designed for forgetting. But Maya sharpened in the stillness. Each night she cataloged the threats, cross-referenced donors, tracked every footprint that led back to Ethan's foundation. Tessa's updates came through encrypted apps. Siddiqui dropped by under cover of routine welfare checks. Carmen prayed more than she slept. Then came the envelope slid under the door. No note, just a single silver cufflink, dark stone inlaid, edges flecked with rust that wasn't rust. Maya held it with tweezers from her camera kit, the same way she once handled broken glass after an explosion photo assignment. Her hands didn't shake. Fear had calcified into clarity. "He's trying to write the ending," she told Tessa on the phone. "Let's give him a better one." Detective Siddiqui arrived the next morning with news that made silence its own language. "They're watching him, but surveillance leaks. You need to vanish for a while." Maya nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. "If I vanish, he wins." The detective sighed, tapping the table. "Then we turn him inside out." They built the sting like a story act: setting, timing, audience. Maya would walk the river path again, wired and shadowed by plainclothes backup. Tessa would record from a van parked 2 blocks off. Carmen would wait at the station, phone in hand, and prayers on repeat. "He's a performer," Siddiqui said. Hell returned to his stage. Maya felt the words settle in her blood. When the detective left, the motel room felt wider. She looked at the cufflink one last time before sealing it in a plastic bag. It glittered like arrogance preserved. That night, the city returned to the river. Rain again, steady and cold, turning the footpath into a ribbon of reflected light. Maya stood at the edge of the same stretch where everything had ended once and would begin again. The mic under her collar ticked with Tessa's whisper counts. Siddiqui's unmarked car waited beyond the bend, engine off. Each breath tasted of metal and storm. Somewhere nearby, expensive shoes clicked against concrete. She turned toward the sound, camera raised, not as weapon but as memory, reclaiming itself. "You shouldn't be here," a voice said. Smooth, practiced, unafraid. "Neither should you," she answered. The river behind her hissed like applause. They rehearsed until the plan felt like muscle memory. In the borrowed van, Tessa checked levels, set markers, and named the files like blessings against chaos. Siddiqui spread a paper map over a pizza box and traced routes with a blunt pencil. Officers without insignia waited at 2 exits where the path met the road. Carmen sat at the precinct with tea that had long gone cold and a phone she could not stop checking. Maya let the text slide under her collar and practiced breathing evenly so the mic would not pop. Rain hung in the air like a curtain waiting for its cue. She memorized the code words that would bring the team running, then slipped the compact camera into her pocket, where it fit like a steadying hand. When the hour turned, she looked at Tessa and said, "Thank you." It carried fear and gratitude in equal measure. The river path had the hush of a stage before an audience takes their seats. Water breathed against stone and rain stitched delicate lines between lamp pools. Maya walked the route they had diagrammed, letting muscle memory borrow from pain. She counted her steps and let the city's hum settle into a useful rhythm. Tessa spoke in her ear with the softness of a hand on a shoulder and fed her the first audio trigger, a line clipped from Ethan's speech where his cadence tilted upward on the third beat. The recording leaked into the night like perfume. Maya stopped near the bend where the railing dips and set the camera for ambient light. The world bristled with small sounds. A leather sole, a coat skimming fabric, the pause before a practiced smile. She felt the old fear begin its climb but kept her mouth steady. Fear could ride. It would not steer. He arrived without hurry. A man who believed the street belonged to him. The cologne folded into the rain and found her first. Maya did not turn. She let her voice go light and curious and asked if he would answer a question about the Foundation's arts program. The line sounded like small talk and hit a hook. Ethan stepped beside her and matched her view of the river as if they were two friends watching weather roll in. His cadence landed on the same third beat as the recording and then slipped when she mentioned the river path by name. He corrected himself. Too smooth. When she said cufflinks, he raised a hand without thinking and the dark inlay sparked. She took a single photograph. He did not like that sound. His smile tightened, the edges of charm curling back to show a harder metal beneath. Tessa cued the second trigger, a backstage clip where his voice dropped into the private register she remembered against her ear. The sound asked a question that had made her freeze once. This time she answered with a name he had not given her, and watched the flinch pass through his shoulders. The wire caught the confession in fragments and the pattern linked to earlier reports. Siddiqui whispered, "Hold your ground," and the night briefly aligned around that sentence. Then Ethan leaned in too close and spoke softly about consequences that do not appear on paper. He reached for her wrist the way a person picks up a glass. The old terror surged, hot and blinding, and then steadied into a clean line. Maya rotated her arm and pressed the shutter close to his mouth. The click startled him. The mask fell. He swore once and turned toward the stairs. He ran and the rain answered with a sudden hard curtain. Maya did not sprint. She followed with a pace that kept him in sight and left room for strategy. The microphone transmitted the rhythm of their steps and the scrape of metal when he hit the stairwell door. Siddiqui's team split the angles, one to the upper landing and one to the street. Tessa counted in her ear to keep her breath even and feed calm back through the wire. The stairwell smelled of rust and wet concrete. Water fell in single file down the rails. Ethan glanced back once and saw not the woman he thought he had made, but the witness he could no longer control. He pushed higher. Maya knew rooftops from long nights of city photography and from the way wind tells a story at elevation. She tightened the strap on her camera and climbed. The door spat them onto the roof like a wave, dropping stones. Wind tore the rain into needles and pinned the city flat below. Ethan kept moving toward the edge where the parapet rose, not running now, turning circles as if testing the air for weakness. Maya tracked him the way she would track a skittish subject, keeping a fixed distance, marking exits, reading light. The mic brushed her collarbone and ticked with breath. "You like stages," she said, and the sentence rode out steady. "Say your lines," he smiled, the public one, then let it die. The river hissed. Somewhere a radio clicked. Siddiqui in the stairwell, closing the triangle. Maya angled herself so a rooftop HVAC panel became a mirror, catching his face and her camera in the same plane. She thought of shutter speed, of the way truth prefers a fraction of a second, and waited for him to choose. Ethan closed the distance with a gentleness that read worse than rage. "You're wounded," he murmured, as if speaking to a skittish animal. The words carried the private cadence she knew too well. When his fingers flicked toward her wrist, Maya stepped half a pace back and lifted the camera, not to blind him, but to time him. The flash stayed off. Ambient would hold the truth better. He leaned, voice dropping into the register that had once unstrung her. "No one will believe," he began, and she cut him with the shape of his own line taped from the gala. In her ear, Tessa whispered. The wind bent them both. Footsteps thudded at the door. Siddiqui's backup, but still too far to matter if a hand found her throat. Maya shifted to keep the HVAC panel aligned, framing his reflection near hers like proof deciding to arrive. He took the bait. "You came back to the river," he said, and the pronoun turned intimate, proprietary. She repeated it softly, and he added enough words to stitch the night to the file Siddiqui needed. Not a confession in headline font, but the pattern that prosecutors thread into a rope. Maya let silence do its work, the way reporters do, and watched him fill it. When he stepped closer to blot her reflection from the metal, she pivoted, catching his face and the cufflink aligned with the scar on his thumb. The shutter whispered twice. "That's enough," Siddiqui called, voice flat as a gavel, and materialized from the stairwell, a shape made of calm. Ethan's smile went to glass. He calculated, and calculation told him to break the moment like a bad glass and run. His shoulder dipped. Maya matched it and didn't give ground. The break came fast and messy. Ethan feinted toward the parapet and then snapped back, hand slicing for the mic at Maya's collar. She moved on instinct, turning her body into negative space, the way photographers slip crowds. His fingers snagged fabric, not skin. Siddiqui crossed the remaining distance like a closing door. "Hands where I can see them," she said, and the steadiness of it cut through the wind. For a beat he hung there between choices, and she saw, not a monster, but an ordinary man who believed the world would cover for him. Then, the decision left his face, and he lunged again. Siddiqui's grip found his wrist. Torque clean, the metal cuff closed with a closing sound that felt like punctuation. Maya exhaled once, long, and the night rearranged around that breath. An hour later, the roof had emptied and the night remembered how to be only rain. At the precinct, fluorescent peace replaced thunder. Maya sat wrapped in a gray blanket that smelled like bleach and old coffee. Tessa hovered with tea, the tremble in her hands revealing what her voice hid. Carmen arrived with the force of weather and folded her daughter into a quiet that made the room bearable. Siddiqui slid the evidence bag across the table. "Mick, card, the cufflink sealed like a small moon." "It's not over," she said, honest as always. But the wire held. Maya nodded. The adrenaline ebbed and left something cleaner behind, a space where her breath could land without scraping. She pictured the river at dawn, and the way light coins itself on water. Tomorrow would be hard. Tonight she had the sound of a closing cuff and a room full of people who stayed. Morning arrived pale and unspectacular, the kind of light that makes cities look honest. Maya watched the courthouse through the cab window as though it were another skyline she had to photograph. Inside, the corridors smelled of varnish and nerves. The scar along her abdomen itched under the silk blouse Tessa had insisted on. Healing skin, meeting old ghosts. Reporters gathered near the steps, their lenses twitching like hungry insects. But Detective Siddiqui shielded her with a practiced hand. "Truth doesn't need to shout," she said. Carmen squeezed Maya's fingers, and together they climbed the marble stairs. Every step made her chest hum with memory, yet she felt lighter than she had in months. In her pocket, a small photo print from that night, Ethan's cufflink caught mid-flash. Not a trophy, not proof anymore, but a reminder that she had turned pain into focus. The courtroom was colder than the hospital ever was. Voices fell into the oak-paneled walls and came back muted. Maya waited at the witness stand as lawyers rearranged their papers, her breath sensing with the hum of the fluorescent lights. When her name was called, she swore the oath with a voice steadier than she expected. Ethan sat at the defense table in a suit too perfect, the same posture he'd used behind podiums, but his left heel twitched. Her eyes found the jury instead. She spoke of the river, the camera, the sound of his laugh when he thought no one was watching. The prosecutor let silence hold after each answer. The silences did their work. When the defense tried to paint her as mistaken, she met the attorney's gaze and said, "Memory keeps receipts." The gallery stilled. Somewhere behind her, Carmen's rosary clicked once, a punctuation mark of faith. Hours folded like pages, each witness adding weight until the story became undeniable. Maya listened as the detective laid out timelines and digital traces, as Tessa's audio reconstruction played. The cufflink scrape, the half-syllable of his name. When the jury flinched at that sound, she realized she wasn't reliving the attack anymore. She was watching its echo lose power. The defense objected. The judge overruled. Ethan's mask slipped only once when the cufflink was entered into evidence, his jaw tightening, breath visible even in the still air. Maya felt no triumph, only a profound exhale. Justice wasn't a thunderclap. It was slow weather, washing what could be washed. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty. The word carried the weight of all the others Maya had wanted to hear. Safe, believed, free. She didn't cry. The tears had been spent long ago, each one earning this moment. Siddiqui shook her hand first, firm and warm. Tessa recorded the courtroom emptying, catching the sound of chairs scraping like waves retreating. Carmen whispered thanks in Spanish to a god who finally listened. Outside, the air felt rinsed. The city noise returned, ordinary and alive. Reporters asked for comment. Maya only said, "I just told the truth." Then she walked toward the river alone, not because she needed to revisit pain, but because that was where her story began and ended differently. At dawn, she returned to the river. The city woke slow, fog curling low like breath over wounds that had learned to close. Maya set the camera on manual and waited for light to find the water. It rose golden, indifferent, magnificent. Her body bore its map of scars, but her pulse was steady. From her pocket, she pulled the single photograph she had printed, the cufflink flashing mid-sture, and released it into the current. It floated a moment, caught sunlight, and was gone. Behind her, the click of another shutter. Tessa, smiling. "For your book someday," she said. Maya smiled back. "For all of us," she answered. The frame caught them both. Two women standing where fear once stood alone, the morning revealing itself around them.